Welcome to a sixth edition of the Influx Lockdown discussions. This week we are talking about money and earnings and just general financial stuff in publishing for writers, for publishers, for anybody in and around the industry. I think in Britain particularly, people aren't very good at talking about money, partly because the people with all the money kind of shut down those discussions, and the people without the money don't really get to talk about it. But Gary's going to lead on this today. So Gary's going to talk about an article that we both read in the bookseller, and then we're going to start riffing off that. So yeah, number 6, money, money, money.
Yeah, I can't believe we're on number 6 already.
6 weeks under lockdown.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been sat at this desk forever, but also no time at all. Anyway, so yeah, we're talking about money today, which I think you're right. It is a tricky subject. And I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I wanted to riff off firstly. There was a piece in the bookseller just over a week ago in their blog section called Reality Rights by the journalist Hannah Williams, which I thought was a very, very interesting read, talking about kind of author earnings and transparency within the publishing industry about who earns what, and this general sort of reticence to talk about financial aspects of writing life, be that for the writer or people working in publishing. And I thought it kind of connects really nicely to what we've been talking about in previous weeks about the issue of class within publishing.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned just now that the English, or maybe the British particularly, are bad at talking about these things. I think that's related to the class issue, and it also relates a little bit to what we were saying about social media and the author, about how a kind of writing lifestyle, which I don't really have any figures for this, but I don't believe very many people live, even within the small number of people who are working writers. I think it might be a deceptive and possibly a quite dangerous kind of fantasy. So I'd like to talk a bit about this. But
and we're talking, before we start, we're talking more specifically about fiction writers than your jobbing journalist or your non-fiction history writer or that sort of thing, right? We're talking about people who write novels.
I think that's good to clarify. I think we should say, when we're talking about writers earning a living, I think we're talking about fiction, aren't we? Let's leave aside non-fiction and journalism and stuff like that, because I feel that's a slightly different thing.
Yeah, I think that's just different ways of getting paid. When you write non-fiction, you tend to pitch something and then someone pays you to do it. Whereas with writing fiction, you kind of finish the project and then sell it. So there's different ways of living. But I think, with fiction writing, it's harder to make a living, partly because you have to do all that writing first for free.
Yeah.
Before you get paid for it. So it's a different ball game, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, before we jump into some of these issues, I thought it would be good to maybe, in this kind of spirit of transparency, you and I are both published authors, but we obviously both run Influx Press. But I think it's probably useful for people to know how exactly, well, we don't have to be too exact, but
I've got my bank statements.
Yeah, you know what I mean? How do we make a living? I mean, how do we do it? So I can start, and then I'll put the question onto you. So I am a published writer of fiction. I'm published by Dead Ink. My first book was with Dead Ink Books, and the second one is coming out of there. That is not where I make the majority of my money. Which I think is to be expected, because these are the first book was a book of short fiction on an independent publisher. I've made X amount of money in royalties, some money in advances, and some money that's come pleasantly through rights sales for like audiobooks and things like that. Essentially, I see that income as kind of a welcome bonus on anything else I'm earning. It's not what I would. It's not something I feel I can count on. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As a kind of steady income, and I think maybe that's because of the kind of work I want to publish. I'm not going for that I want to publish as me, the writer, I'm not particularly interested in making money as a writer at any costs. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to have the work that I do published, basically.
You
So
want it, you don't want that to compromise your writing, essentially.
Yeah, and maybe maybe I'm lucky there, because I'm going to go into, because I really make my money doing a few other things, which are Influx Press. We pay ourselves an amount from Influx Press,
Mm-hmm.
not a full wage. I'd
Nope.
say approximately to a third or half of a monthly wage. The rest of the money I make through freelance editing. So,
For who?
this can be for self-published writers. So I use the website Readsy, which is a great website for professional editors to offer their services. I've done freelance work for
Other publishing
Unbound,
houses, right?
for
Yeah,
Denning,
exactly.
all that kind of stuff. Because I
Mm.
think you and I, we've been doing this long enough that we've got a, I suppose you've got a kind of a track record as editing, and also kind of freelance teaching work, doing seminars,
Mm-hmm.
guest lectures, that kind of stuff. That's a lot of work. Not a huge amount of my income, but that comes fairly regularly to me now, and to you, I believe. So maybe that's a good way to hand that over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a part-time job, which is 2 days a week working for a charity. At the moment, it's 3 days a week because oddly, I needed to extend my hours during lockdown because there was more work, which is a bit weird. That is like my bread and butter, really. That's the stuff that keeps the ball from the door, plus the influx half wage, if we're going to call it that. And yeah, freelance stuff really can be teaching universities, can also be writing the odd article for, I don't know, Vice, Guardian, Tribune magazine, whatever. In terms of earnings from books, the only significant amount of money I've ever made is from the Wetherspoons Carpet book, and it was a good advance, below 10 grand, but it was a good advance, and then that earns through pretty quickly, but then sales dropped fairly steadily after that, and I made the foolish mistake of having a part-time job, getting a book deal, quitting the part-time job, thinking, all right, here we go, money's coming in, don't need to be working anymore. And then that, the life cycle of a book, unless it's a bestseller, that even if it does well, and the Wetherspoons book did do well, sold like 25,000 copies,
and that had a good life to it, didn't it?
Good life.
Years, yeah.
But that, I haven't made what would be considered an average annual salary on that book. So there is absolutely no way I could have lived off that project. I got a part-time job again pretty soon after having quit the other one. But yeah, I saw that possibly with a little bit of hubris at the time of like, okay, right, now I'm in, and now I see something like that. I've got other projects kind of on the go with my agent, which nothing's been signed yet. But if there was, I wouldn't make that same choice again. I would keep the work I'm doing, Influx and the part-time job, and do the writing on the side. I wouldn't make the same mistake of quitting, thinking that book is then going to become the job.
You do a lot of kind of journalistic work as well, don't you? Or you used to, at least.
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, I mean, I think with well, I haven't recently because of COVID and whatever. But yeah, I used to probably write 2 or 3 articles a month, and that's like $250 per article ish. It can be a good way of
a good revenue stream, as they call it.
It can be, yeah. I mean, you always feel like it's going to take less time than you think, and then you end up working over 3 or 4 days, and then that's 250 quid over 4 days, which isn't actually as much as you think it is.
Okay, so I think are we missing anything there? I think that's essentially how we make our money. So for both of us,
well, it's all sorts of ways, isn't it? It's not. I think that's probably the key component to this discussion is the variety of ways of earning money.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a part-time job at the moment. Before, when you didn't have the part-time job, you were it was Influx and the writing.
Mm.
I think, I mean, for a long time I had another job. For me, it's interesting that I don't make the majority of my money through my writing, but I do make some,
Mm.
and it's actually quite. And the more work you have out there, the more kind of potential there is for kind of, you know, something to do well, or you get someone, I don't know, might pay a lot for, you know, heaven forbid, might do a film adaptation or something. You never know what will happen.
Yeah.
And what I would say, I think, has been useful for being a published author of fiction, definitely led to get more work in kind of the related fields of guest lecturing, guest seminar, speaking to creative writing students, being asked to contribute to stuff. So it does have this kind of rolling effect, which I think can be very beneficial. And I'm still doing all of the work I do is still, I consider, in the kind of literary world at the moment. And I think I'm very lucky to do that. I have to do freelance work on books that perhaps I wouldn't read myself, but, you know, so what? It's a job at the end of the day. And I'm still, everything I kind of do at the moment to earn money is in the world of writing. And I don't really see a problem with that. So to go to the piece that was in the bookseller, and to be honest, if you did like a Google search for Guardian pieces on this, there's about one every 6 months about sort of lamenting the fact that writers, and I presume they mean fiction writers. I don't know. They're never that clear. Lamenting the fact that they don't make a living wage out of it now.
When you say now, see, that's interesting. You've already said they don't make a living wage out of it now, suggesting that there was that this is abnormal.
Well, that's what I want to look at the figures, because just looking at this piece here, it says, blah, blah, blah. 2/3 of writers only earn between £100 and £10,000 a year. Only 5% can expect to earn over £30,000 a year. The average income has shrunk from the equivalent. So I presume that means what you'd be earning now, but in 2006, so nearly 15 years ago, £18,000 in today's money, and that shrunk to £10,000.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Are there more writers?
18,000 a year is probably livable, but it's not a big wage, is it?
Yeah, livable. Just not in London.
Probably not in London either.
Not unless you're, you know, I mean, you could live on 18 in London, but you wouldn't have much left over.
So this is what I mean. You're right. I used the word now. So when are we talking about when people were making this living out of them? I don't know. I mean, I think maybe the 90s was the last period where you had those really big sort of superstar writers with giant advances. What do you think?
Well, there are still giant advances. You know, there are still, you know, you hear about six-figure sums a lot and all that kind of stuff, but they're very few and far between. I think also there's, I might have this wrong, but my hunch is there's more books are published at the moment. So there are more people writing. So that's going to mess with the averages quite a lot, isn't it? You know, if you've got like more people writing books that aren't selling, that's going to have the bottom bracket bigger than the top bracket. But I think, I don't know. I mean, this feeds into our class thing as well, doesn't it? About the idea of what is earning a living, and what, you know, the fact that, you know, what I was saying a couple of episodes ago about the dole being okay to live on, which meant you could then hone your craft.
Absolutely.
You know, would some people who were writing in the 60s and 70s, they may not have been earning as much, but they might have been able to live off it better.
Yeah.
You know, so you could be I think the difference here we got to talk about is being a full-time writer or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's no point in talking about how much money you earn if it doesn't actually affect your day to day, right?
Absolutely. So okay, so yeah, going back to this, the figure that was given was only 10% of authors earn their income solely from writing.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not even entirely sure if what we're talking about here. Are we talking just about fiction writers? Are we talking about the non-fiction writer? Whatever, I don't know. So let's say only 10% of authors now derive their income solely for writing. Okay, that's fine. But I mean, again, I'm not I don't necessarily see a problem with that, because if you're a writer that makes your income from writing and teaching, for example, and you're, I don't know, teach creative writing, is that something to be upset about? I don't know.
I don't suppose so, but there is a certain. You can only be a creative writing teacher in a university if you have a PhD, more or less. You have to be in the academy, which denotes a certain amount of debt or class privilege. So that idea that, oh, it's fine, you can just be a teacher in university and earn your money that way, is certainly marginalizing a lot of people who might want to write or earn money from writing, I think. But choosing a different job, let's say, where you could be whatever you want to be, just a different job, it doesn't matter, I'll pick any job.
Chef,
yeah, great, right? Let's say you're a chef. That's absolutely fine to be a chef and also write books.
Yeah,
it's absolutely fine to be a finance consultant and write books. It's fine to be a nursery teacher and write books. It's fine to be a hospital porter and write books. And in fact, slightly
and that's the issue, isn't it?
You're not allowed to be something else and a writer.
Well, I think well, you should be anyway. So I picked out this quote from the piece because I liked it. And I kind of I think there's a lot I agree with here, and this is about this idea relating to what you're just saying about the idea of what a writer should be or what their lifestyle should be. The agents, editors, and writers on these platforms, still talking about kind of social media, Twitter, Instagram, and so on, still sell the myth that writing is a leisure activity reserved for the upper middle classes. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that entirely.
And it carries on. Surrounded by photos of writing retreats, softly lit lunches with agents in Soho restaurants, and rent-free stays with relatives in New York or London, writers' lavish fridges and homes, it feels increasingly like the tastemakers of the literary world do not want to talk about money. So I think there's a really interesting issue here in how it related to what we were talking about, social media and the author. There's a kind of visual code for the writer's life that, and I think it's largely bogus, but I do think it's something people aspire to, and if they can't achieve that, it feels like it's a sort of failure, which is why we get the endless articles about no one can be a full-time writer anymore.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
So yeah, it does. So what you're talking about there is essentially what our conception of the full-time writer is, what our imaginative realm of the full-time writer is, which is this kind of petit bourgeois or like bohemian bourgeois lifestyle where you're writing all the time and you're hanging out with other writers and you're going to literary soirees and that sort of stuff, rather than having what might be ostensibly a normal life and then writing. Yeah, so I think there's a certain amount of people who maybe are invested in keeping that thing alive, that concept alive, because actually it means that only they can do it.
Yeah, and it was alluded to this idea of hidden money in the publishing world, especially in the writing world. What do we mean by hidden money? So, and it relates to this idea that maybe that literary fiction, at least, is almost a kind of an indulgence, an upper middle class bourgeois indulgence. So the hidden money might be, wealthy parents who are able to, you've got a place to, or wealthy parents who are able to subsidize your lifestyle. That's one.
Yeah. Wealthy spouse.
A wealthy spouse is able to subsidize that life. And again, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with those things. Some people are luckier than others in these cases. Right? What I don't like is the fact that it's not something that's often made public. And I think it's not made public because there's probably a kind of embarrassment attached to it. And it also chips away at that Instagram-friendly writer's life vision, doesn't it?
Yeah, I also think it chips away at the way we value things in societies is through their monetary value. So if you're saying I can live my life based off my writing, that gives your writing more value,
Yeah,
right?
that's,
Whereas if you're saying, I have to live off my husband or wife who works at Deutsche Bank in order to write, that actually devalues in the modern concept of what value is your writing. If we're going to take earnings, author earnings, or earnings from your writing as the intrinsic value to it, we all know that's not where the value lies. But this is 40 years of neoliberal economics. But yeah, I think you don't have to declare it, but I think there's these ideas that oh yeah, I live off my writing, or I'm a full-time writer, and people ask you how you do that. You can be honest about it.
Yeah.
maybe people aren't, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also think that with writing, you have I don't know if it's different to other industries. I mean, I think of like film and music, where being successful is like 50,000 seat stadium tour, or massive blockbuster. Money's not dirty in those industries.
So I
The
ask you,
rock star we think about is like throwing TVs out of a hotel room, etc. All those cliches. When we think of the cliche of a successful writer, it's them studiously at home. It's like a very different conception of the artist.
And this relates back to the class issue we talked about a few weeks ago, because I think in the world of at least the English upper middle classes, or the wealthy parts of British society, it's considered kind of gauche, isn't it, to talk about money? The only people who talk about money are the people who don't have money, right? It's that sort of idea.
Yeah.
And I think some of that attitude, unfortunately, is definitely there in the world of literary fiction. I think, and I think it's almost seen as crass to talk about such things. And I don't think, and you're right, that isn't the case in other industries.
No, I don't think it is. And I think that idea is that there's the way we've talked about this privately before, not on these episodes, but the idea that a book isn't a commodity, that it isn't something that's sold and it somehow transcends, which is ironic considering what I just said about how people value their writing being how much money it makes. But at the same time, it's kind of the same two sides of the same coin. On the other hand, people refuse to accept that books are just there to be sold.
Well, they're not just there to be that, but
that's one of their primary functions.
Sold. It's a publishing industry. If we do not sell books, us as Influx Press, I mean, if we don't sell books and people don't buy the books, we stop existing. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know how much clearer to make that, but I still think some people struggle with that, with that very simple truth. And to go back to something actually you said a little bit earlier about some writers obviously do get gigantic advances and they are very successful. It is vanishingly rare for that to happen. And I also think it has a huge distorting effect on what people expect, because these are the stories that make headlines. This is what The Guardian, whatever, they'll endlessly talk about, a kind of breakthrough writer who got a huge deal and did really, really well. And that's great. And it's not attacking those writers at all, but I think it's such a distorting thing, because simply most writers, even writers on big five publishers writing literary fiction, don't make anything near that amount.
In literary fiction, if you're like doing mid-list, you're not some hot debut literary fiction, you've sold okay. You're not getting more than £5,000 advance from a major publishing house. No. You're just not. And that's we don't not have to like expose Influx's ways of working, but we give okay advances. They're not life-changing, they're not £5,000, but it's not something you can live off. But at the same time, I think we can just quickly discuss how royalties work, because for people who don't know, when the advance is set against your royalties. So for ease of maths, your royalties are 10%. You get an advance of 10,000 copies, and let's say you make a
You mean in
pound.
advance of £10,000?
Sorry, yeah, an advance of £10,000, yeah. And let's just say you make a pound on every book, just to keep it simple. So in order for you to earn more than £10,000 from your advance, that book has to sell
10,000 copies.
10,000 copies.
10,001 copies, I
Yeah.
think.
And then you start earning more.
Yeah.
And that there is the situation I think a lot of people don't quite understand. You're not being paid for the book. You're being given money offset against what you're going to earn with the book. Now, when we give, let's say, for again ease of maths, a £1,000 advance, and the book sells 5,000 copies, you're making money after your £1,000.
Yeah, you get through that. What we call it earning out, don't we? You earn out that advance fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And then
and then if you sold 10,000 copies, you would then end up having earned the same amount of money that you might have done at a bigger publishing house that sold 10,000 copies. So it balances itself out after a while.
Yeah, it can do. And also, I mean, one thing I'd say about the big advances, of course, they're great. If someone, let's say the next fiction project I was working on, and someone said, right, we're going to offer you 30 grand advance. I'd be like, sick.
Yeah.
But I would think carefully about it, because I would know that means that publisher thinks the book is going to achieve a certain amount of success in sales. If it doesn't, okay, I've got that money, brilliant, but I'm not getting another book published by them. No. Now, it sounds brutal and harsh, but it's happened to a few writers, didn't it?
Lots and lots and lots and lots of writers.
Who's the very famous example? I've forgotten his name now.
Gotham Malkani.
Yes, and what was
London
his book?
London Starney was the name of the book. Yeah.
Yes, which I think it did sell pretty well, but it didn't sell enough to kind of match the huge amounts of advances he got, and he didn't publish a book for another 10 years
at least. And it wasn't just that people wouldn't publish him; it also affected his relationship with his own writing, his confidence. All that stuff. It can be dangerous if you have a big advance and then the book flops.
Yeah,
that's not good for anybody.
But that's the thing, isn't it? If it's been anticipated to sell 100,000 copies and it sells 30,000 copies, for us, if we sold 30,000 copies of an Influx book, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, we'd be laughing. But
it's all about that. What's it? The anticipation behind something can be
the relative failure or success of it. Yeah, exactly. So, and it's about what you invest in it and what you get as a return. And I think that's really important. And I think that's if people are talking about how much money they earn per year from their books and stuff like that, from their writing, we're not talking about someone getting a 30 grand advance every year. That's kind of impossible. It has to be that your books continue to sell, and that's how you keep making money. I think that's probably why it's so rare that you have this top 10 percentile, then top 1 percentile, or whatever the figures were we had earlier, that your books have to consistently still be selling. Like, I'm not making any more money off the Spoons Carpets book. No. Like, that's done, right? So I have to then have another book in order to keep, if I was living off that, in order to keep that income going.
Yeah, and it's probably worth here mentioning then, I mentioned like rights sales, for example. So I suppose that there's an obvious reason why Spoons Carpets probably wasn't translated into French or because it's so UK specific.
Yeah, it wasn't big in Japan.
If you're a writer and you can get books into translation, and hopefully you get a good deal via your agent or your publisher, that is another way that you start having that sustainable income. But that's difficult. And if your writing is, let's say, more niche in its subject matter, or if it's very UK specific, it's less likely to happen, isn't it? Whereas if you've got your book published in the US and all across Europe and in the UK, okay, great, you're getting a lot more income that way, I think. But even then, it's never a guarantee, is it? It's never a guarantee that the next book is going to.
No, it's not. And those rights sales are often dependent on how successful the book is in the UK in the first place.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't think it's ever a guarantee. I just think, given all that, maybe what's needed for lots of writers. I mean, I'm sure these things must exist. It's like just a real understanding of how this all works, and not to be sort of, I guess, not to believe in that odd dream of like the writer's life, because ultimately you'll just be disappointed.
Yeah, I don't really think it exists, and I think the maybe the people who are, let's say, living that life, I think it's a kind of performance.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's performance, really, isn't it?
Especially these days.
Let's not get into that kind of.
No, I think it's dangerous, and I think it's. I think it does a disservice to a lot of writers who write incredible work and are quite happy just having another job. And people with 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever, like they have to earn a living. They can't. Writing is. It's not an indulgence, because I think it's necessary culturally, and it's necessary for writers to write. But I think to pretend that you can do it on your own, just earning all your money, living in your Tuscan villa or whatever in the summer, that's disingenuous.
It is. I mean, it sounds nice, but actually, it's not really a lifestyle I ever aspired to. Anyway, I knew I wanted to.
Tuscan villas.
Yeah, I like going on holiday to Italy, but there's it's not the kind of writer lifestyle I aspire to. Anyway, I'm just trying to think. I don't know. What did I think? I definitely don't think of fiction writing as a hobby. I really don't. I hate that idea. I take it very, very seriously, and I want it. And it's, I'd say, part of my career, but it's not my entire career, because really the majority of work I do, and paid work, is editing work and running a business. But I think that's fine, because I like how those things interrelate. I never once ever thought that I want to write this book and that will be how I make my income, especially as I live in London. Do you know what I mean? I never even thought that. I never thought that as a possibility.
No, I don't. I just think it's ultimately like, if you're. I'm not advocating people just to do any old job, but if you're looking for stories and you want to write about stuff, you've got to live life. You can't just be sat at home. I mean, you can, like some people can do it, but a lot of people can't. Actually engaging in real life by doing a job or working somewhere, or even volunteering, like I don't care, like just go and do something somewhere else, But there are so many obvious examples. T.S. Eliot being a bank clerk.
Yeah.
I can't think of the others, but there are a lot of these examples. I wonder if the writer as full-time thing is a sort of an amalgam of the kind of Bloomsbury Group, elitist, posh, upper class element, and the post-war 60s, 70s kind of like, you can earn money being an artist thing coming together, coalescing in the 80s and 90s, and that fallacy becoming exposed post kind of 20th century. I think it's a 20th century concept.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think you can make money as a writer, artist kind of person, but I think it is this combination of things. You're writing your work and that gets sold, and as we've discussed, let's say you're a really good spoken word performer or something, like maybe performance is the thing you do. You might be giving workshops about how to write, doing all this sort of stuff, and that combination of things can be a living. And of course we know people who do that.
Yeah, plenty of people. Yeah,
it's a lot of work for people, and I think that's something I'd like to stress, is that going the kind of freelancey route, or having various different income streams as we do, is definitely not the easy route, is it?
No,
the easy route to do things. And this goes back to this idea of this vision of the sort of leisurely writer, Bloomsbury, who we think doesn't exist. And it kind of goes against that, this idea that it's going to be hard work basically to make this work, but you can make it work.
You can make it work. Writing's hard enough as it is. Trying to make it work financially is, I don't know. I think, it can work, but like you say, it's this idea that you just derive your income from writing. from your creative writing. You might actually derive your income, a lot of it, from being a copywriter, or being in marketing or advertising and doing the writing that way.
I know plenty of published writers who do a lot of copywriting work because I mean there's obviously a related profession.
Yeah. We're going to have to wrap this up. So, what sort of conclusions can we draw?
What conclusions should we draw?
Don't quit your job. That was one of them.
Don't quit your job. But I think everyone in the writing and publishing world should be more transparent about these things. And I think more people should be having this kind of conversation that we're having now, and kind of demystifying it a bit. Yeah,
I agree.
I think we should demystify the image of the writer.
Yeah, I mean, most people who are writing at 6 a.m. on the kitchen table before their kids get up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And whether it, I don't know. I mean, it's this idea that whether that should be the case, but me personally, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think.
I think should or shouldn't are probably not as necessary as what is the truth. Like, should writers all be able to earn from their writing? Possibly, in an ideal world. But do they? No, they don't.
No.
And we can work towards creating better environments for writers by more public investment, by more art spending from the government. That sort of stuff. We can do that by publishers like us earning more money. By if we earn more money, we can pay better advances, etc. Things like the net book agreement, when that got taken out, which was the fixed price of books. That's made a lot of publishers suffer on their bottom line. Maybe not the big corporations, but still. I think there's numerous ways we can improve writers' incomes, but I think ultimately an honest discussion about how the writers who purport to have these lifestyles, what's the hidden money there, is probably well worth digging out, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually, because just to try and wrap things up, to end it back on that kind of class point, because the one thing we haven't really talked about is that obviously in this kind of setup that we've described, that it's going to benefit people who are from a more privileged socio-economic background, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That simply is not right. It's not right. It's not fair. So greater transparency, I think, would highlight these issues. And then I agree. If we view like literature as a thing that has inherent value, right, as well as being a commodity, maybe it does need more government funding. Maybe it does need more investment into it. I would say it does.
So would I. There we go. Right. Back next week, probably. As long as lockdown goes on.
Okay, that was good. That was nice and succinct, that one. I liked it.
Okay, I think we've done that.